Good morning, Clem, too, and everyone. Hope you're having a good day. I don't know why I do the daily weather report. It's overcast, but it has warmed up, and the snow is slowly melting and going away. But I know we have friends in Saskatchewan who had a minus 45 wind chill factor, I think they said yesterday. That is pretty darn cold. I've been out there for almost that cold, and it just takes your breath away. So I'm grateful today that God called me to live in British Columbia and not in Saskatchewan and some other places. Anyway, so we're looking at God's top 10 list of good behavior. And the very first principle that we were called to build our lives around, to build good behavior around, was the principle of, you shall have no other gods before me. And then he goes into the second command, which sounds very similar. It's slightly different. This one says, you shall not make for yourself an idol, and you're not supposed to bow down to it, and you're not supposed to worship. Now, that may seem like a concept far off over here from people long ago, or, people over in Africa, or wherever your stereotypes are of people that bow down to idols, and it has nothing to do with us. Well, stick with me and hang in there for a couple of days, and we're going to begin to see how our lives are tempted to fall to this command as well. But let's back up today, and today we just want to talk about the people of Israel and where this command came out of. So God had done a great work over a period of a lot of years. He took this man named Abraham and his small little family, and he promised them a land, and he promised them a people, and he promised them an inheritance, and that he would bless the whole world through him. And through a series of events, Abraham ended up in Egypt, and his family there became slaves, but they grew tremendously. They were probably in the millions by the time God called them out 400 years later. His plan was to bring them to the promised land. These were a people without any political or military or social power at all, and they were up against one of the greatest militaries that the people knew of that time. And God did a great work, and he brought them out of Egypt through a series of miracles. He brought them out a whole lot. We're not going to go into all the details. They have now left Egypt, and God is now giving Moses the instructions for how he wants them to build their society. And the very first instructions he gave them were this list of 10 commandments. And so he said, listen, you came out of a world that believes in a lot of gods, not unlike our world today. That's where our society is at. It believes in a lot of gods, and it believes in no God all at the same time. Egypt believed in a lot of gods, including the fact that the Pharaoh himself was supposedly one of the gods. That's the culture that they lived in for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it wasn't just the Egyptians, it was all the people. All of the people in the Middle East at that time had a lot of gods. It just was the way things were. And God was actually introducing something very new and very unique to them and to the people around them, that there is only one true God. And he has expressed himself, and he has done mighty things on their behalf. And so that's the reason why he starts off with these first two commands that they needed to build their lives around. You are not going to be a people with many gods or willing to accept other people having other gods as okay, however you want to see it. You are being called, he's telling the people of Israel, you are being called to believe in one God. There's only one God that exists. and he is the God over everyone, and especially over you, because God said, I have entered into a covenant relationship with you, Israel, a special relationship, so that the whole world would know what a loving relationship would look like between this one God and his people, so that the other people would be drawn to follow this one God. And so these first two commands are vitally, vitally important. You shall have no other gods before me. Yes, there's other supposed gods out there, but you aren't to believe in them. You aren't to follow them. You aren't to have them at all. And secondly, you must resist the urge to make your own God out of something from the earth. You shall have no idols, nothing to represent a God at all. This is a tall order. Now, why would God do this? I'm going to try to screen share a different screen than I normally do. Here we go. Because it's a bit of a longer passage, and you might not be able to see it. The script is a little small, but I want to read for you something that Moses wrote down towards the end of his life. And I'm going to begin reading in verse 9, and we're going to continue on for just a little bit. God said to Moses and to the people of Israel, only be careful and watch yourselves closely so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen. In other words, the gracious things that God had done on their behalf, or let them fade from your heart as long as you live. So when God does something good for you, remember it. Hold on to it. Teach them to your children and their children after them. Remember the day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, and he said, assemble the people before me to hear my words. This is what we are studying, the 10 Commandments. That's what it's referencing, the time when that happened. Moses himself went up on the mountain and met with God. Remember that. Assemble the people before me to hear my words, that they may learn to revere me as long as they live in the land, and may teach them to their children. You came near and stood at the foot of the mountain while it blazed with fire to the very heavens, with black clouds and deep darkness. Then the Lord spoke to you out of the fire, and you heard the sounds of the words, but saw no form. There was only a voice. He declared to you his covenant, the 10 Commandments, which he commanded you to follow, and then wrote them on 2 stone tablets. And the Lord directed me at that time to teach you the decrees and laws you are to follow in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. Catch it again in verse 15. You saw no form of any kind the day the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire. Therefore, watch yourselves very carefully so that you do not become corrupt and make for yourself an idol, an image of any shape, whether formed like a man or a woman, or like an animal on the earth, or a bird that flies in the air, or like any creature that moves along the ground, or any fish in the waters below. And when you look up to the sky and see the sun and the moon and the stars and all the heavenly array, do not be enticed into bowing down to them or worshiping things the Lord your God has apportioned to all the nations under the heaven. But as for you, the Lord took you and brought you out of the iron smelting furnace, out of Egypt, to be the people of his inheritance, as you are now. So did you catch that? The 2 primary phrases in there were, you saw no form of any kind. You did not see God. You only heard God. And that's because the nature of God is such that he is invisible to us right now. We cannot see him with our human eyes. If somebody says, I saw God, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. But God himself said, nobody can see me and live. They will die. When Moses begged God to let him see him, he said, it can't happen. It'll kill you. But this is what I'll do. I'm going to walk on by. And when I go by and am walking away, you'll be able to see a glimpse of me, but not my face, God said, because nobody can see God's face and live. And so because God is an invisible God, we are not supposed to have physical things that represent God. It's interesting that the people of Israel, this is like the very first command they actually broke. While Moses is getting these instructions, the people were down in the valley building a golden calf to represent their God and to worship him. Our hearts are so prone to idol making. I'm going to stop there. And on Monday, we're going to come back and look at some verses about how we are tempted to make idols, not in the same way they made them back then, but in a different way. But for this weekend, worship the Lord your God only. That is our encouragement today. Hope you have a good weekend. Look forward to seeing you all on Monday.